Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being here today to discuss the crucial need to uphold the Second Amendment. And I know our witnesses today and many of my colleagues will agree that the right to bear arms is one that we must do everything in our power to uphold and defend for the American people that elected us. Now, Mr. Langworthy, are you at all familiar with the ATF's Form 4473, the firearms transaction record?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain the evolution of this document?
So this began in the Gun Control Act, right, which is what established federal firearms licensees to begin with. And originally this document, you'd effectively just attest that you were non-prohibited. Of course, over time, what makes an individual prohibited has expanded rapidly. But for right now, I guess your question is what do you include on the document? So personal identifying information, name, address, a proof of a piece of ID, and then the firearms that are to be transferred.
Okay. I believe it started off as a one-page document. It's now a 7-page document, and I will say that even when I tried to download it, it took a very long time. The ATF has made it very hard to acquire the document, and you need certain system requirements, and then you have to go through several hoops just to download it, and I hear a lot of feedback from our constituents on that. Can you speak to the language in the document?
I can mostly from memory, yes.
Okay. You know, constituents in my district have said that it's become so complex that it's deterring people from obtaining and purchasing weapons.
So the instructions are certainly very obtuse, right? There are yes and no questions on the front. They ask for identifying information. They ask for identification on the firearm. Then there's a whole additional box whether or not you picked it up on the day of purchase. So it can be quite complicated, especially in jurisdictions where you have a mandatory waiting period.
Okay. Do you believe that the agenda at the ATF was to make the document a deterrent for law-abiding citizens to purchase firearms?
I believe that the Gun Control Act was pretty facially a deterrent to the interstate transfers in arms.
Okay. Now I want to move on and talk about pistol braces. Mr. Bosco, we have all heard the story about why you created the pistol brace. And innovation like yours is what makes this country exceptional, and we applaud it. Why would the ATF impose rules against your pistol brace?
I mean, I can't speak specifically to why or what the ATF did. I do know that it is a political issue. So essentially, the political winds at ATF changed after 10 years, and they decided that that was something that they were going to go after. We do understand that there were people, there was a transition team involved when Trump finished his presidency, and there was a Biden transition team that went into ATF and requested ATF asked them what things should we be working on, and those were the points that President Biden pointed out in his first speech about firearm regulation in his first weeks in office.
Well, I do know that constituents of mine, specifically returning veterans who go to ranges, think it is an absolutely great innovation. It is very helpful to them in their lives. And lastly, Ms. Swearer, do you think that the recent ATF rules that are allegedly meant to deter crime might be leading Americans to obtain weapons in illegal fashion?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understood that question.
Okay, some of the various ATF rules and regulations that have been put on the books in the last several years, do you believe that they've been intended to make our law-abiding gun owners and purchasers appear to be acting in an illegal fashion?
Well, I'm not sure that the intent is to make it look that way, but in practice, that is what happens is you have law-abiding, peaceable citizens who, especially in the case of this pistol brace rule, are sitting there with their lawfully obtained firearms, and then a lot of times even without their knowledge, because they're not paying attention to what goes on in regulatory rulemaking processes. Overnight, they are now felons, whether they recognize it or not. So in practice, regardless of what the intent is, in practice, this is not directed at violent criminals. It is directed at and has the effect of creating criminals out of peaceable citizens.
That's great. In my home state of New York, many regulations have been put on the books that have drastically deterred legal gun dealers from selling to law-abiding citizens in preventing them from purchasing arms. Can you speak to what ridiculous gun regulations are doing to the law-abiding gun owners and legal gun dealers?
Again, I would say, I know that time is essentially expired,
sure.
But to summarize, it has that same effect, regardless of what the intent is. In practice, the biggest impact that it has is to create criminals where there were not criminals previously. It's not directed at violence or violent crime.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.